She leaned down, her voice low enough that only the nearby tables heard. "Bringing you the good food, that is cute." I sat at a table behind a pillar with no place card, no water glass, and no silverware. My father took a sip of wine and told me I should probably leave. So I stood up. I walked out of that ballroom carrying the one thing they could not see coming. My name is Melody Diaz, and I am 34 years old. Standing at the entrance of the grand ballroom in the Saltmere Bluffs Resort, I felt less like a guest and more like a ghost haunting the edges of a celebration that had explicitly prayed for my absence. The resort itself was a masterpiece of Pacific Northwest luxury, perched on the jagged edge of a fictional island off the coast of Washington, where the pines met the gray. Churning ocean. The air outside was thick with salt and a biting wind, but inside, the climate was controlled to a perfect 72 degrees. It smelled of expensive lilies, roasted garlic, and the specific, metallic scent of money being burned at a rate of $500 a minute. To understand why I walked out of that ballroom with a hard drive in my clutch, instead of a tear on my cheek, you have to understand the house I grew up in. It was a pristine, two-story colonial in a suburb just east of Seattle, where the lawns were manicured to within an inch of their lives, and the rain was the only thing that dared to be messy. Inside, the hallway leading to the living room was a gallery of the Diaz family history. There were dozens of framed photographs arranged in a geometric spread. There was Cassidy at 3 years old, wearing a tiara and holding a wand. There was Cassidy at 10, winning the regional spelling bee. There was Cassidy at 16, being crowned homecoming queen. In almost every group shot, my sister was in the center, catching the light, her smile practiced and radiant. I was there too, of course. But if you looked closely, you would see a pattern. I was always on the periphery. I was the blur at the edge of the frame, the shoulder cut off by the matte border, or the face half hidden behind a shadow. My mother, Teresa, never explicitly said she had a favorite child. If you asked her, she would clutch her pearls and say she loved us equally. But love is not just a word. It is a frequency. When Cassidy walked into a room, Teresa's voice would jump an octave. It became warm, melodic, and full of breath. "There she is," she would say. When I entered the room, the temperature did not drop, but the air thinned. My mother would look up from her magazine, and she would release a sigh. It was a short, sharp exhalation through her nose. It was the sound you make when you realize you have forgotten to defrost the chicken or when a bill arrives a day earlier than expected. It was the sound of a mild inconvenience. "Oh," she would say, "it is you." My father, Victor, operated on a different metric. For him, human value was calculated by job titles and visible success. He was a man who respected corner offices, heavy cardstock business cards, and handshakes that crushed metacarpals. He did not understand the digital world, and he certainly did not respect it. I worked as a remote efficiency consultant. My job was to analyze corporate workflows, identify bottlenecks, and restructure teams for better output. It involved high-level data analysis, psychology, and complex problem-solving. But because I did it from a laptop in my home office, often wearing sweatpants, Victor decided it was not real work. "So," he would ask at Sunday dinners, stabbing his steak with aggressive precision, "still playing on the computer?" "Melody. I am consulting for a logistics firm in Chicago." "Dad," I would reply, "we are restructuring their supply chain." "Right," he would snort. "In my day, you had to put on a suit to make $1. Now everyone just sits at home and calls it a career." "Cassidy, tell us about the marketing pitch. You actually went to the client's office, right?" It was not just the dismissal that defined my childhood. It was my reaction to it. Growing up on the edge of the frame gave me a unique vantage point. When you are not the star, you become the observer. I learned to watch. I learned to read the micro-expressions that people hide when they think no one is looking. I developed a hyper-awareness of tone, body language, and inconsistency. My family called it being difficult. They called it being negative. They called it paranoia. I called it pattern recognition. There was a specific evening that solidified this dynamic, a memory that is burned into my brain like a brand. I was 24. Victor had invited a potential business partner to dinner. His name was Julian Thorne, a man who claimed to be a developer with access to prime real estate near the waterfront. The dinner was an agonizing performance of forced laughter and wine refills. Cassidy was there, charming Julian with stories about her sorority. Teresa was serving roast beef, beaming every time Julian complimented the china. Victor was practically glowing, already counting the millions he thought he was about to make. But I was watching Julian. I noticed that every time money was mentioned, Julian touched his neck. I noticed that his watch, a heavy gold Rolex, did not sweep smoothly. The second hand ticked. I noticed that when he talked about his previous projects, he never used specific names of buildings or architects, only vague buzzwords like luxury and high concept. After he left, the family sat in the living room, buzzing with excitement. "This is it," Victor said, pouring himself a brandy. "This is the deal that retires us in style." "I do not think you should sign with him," I said. The room went silent. Victor turned to me, his face flushing a dark, dangerous red. "Excuse me." "He is lying," I said calmly. "His watch is a fake. His shoes are expensive but scuffed in a way that suggests he does not have a car and walks everywhere. And he kept checking his phone every time you mentioned the deposit amount, like he was waiting for a signal. He is desperate. Dad, do not give him the money." Victor slammed his glass down. "My God. Melody, can you ever just be happy? Can you ever stop looking for the dark cloud? Julian is a visionary. You are just jealous because you do not understand how big business works." "You are being toxic," Cassidy added, shaking her head. "It is actually sad." Teresa just sighed, that familiar, sharp exhalation. "Why do you have to ruin the mood, Melody?" So I stopped talking. Victor wired $50,000 to Julian Thorne the next morning as a good faith deposit for the partnership. 3 months later, Julian Thorne vanished. The phone numbers were disconnected. The office address he had given belonged to a mailboxes, etc., in a strip mall. The police told Victor that Julian was actually a grifter named Gary, who had been running the same scam up and down the West Coast. I waited for the apology. I waited for Victor to say, "You were right." I waited for Teresa to say, "We should have listened." The apology never came. Instead, the incident was buried. We never spoke of Julian Thorne again. If I brought it up, the subject was changed immediately. I learned a brutal lesson that night in the Diaz family. Truth was not about facts. It was about authority. If the truth came from the wrong person, the shadow, the non-star, it was treated as an insult. They would rather lose $50,000 than admit I saw something they missed. That was when I stopped trying to save them and started trying to save myself. I found my escape in a woman named Renee Whitaker. I met her at a seminar on crisis management in downtown Seattle. Renee was 60 years old, with hair cut sharp as a blade and eyes that looked like they could scan a balance sheet through a concrete wall. She was a legend in the corporate world, known as the cleaner when a CEO tweeted something offensive or a product failed. Companies called Renee. She saw something in me during the Q&A session. I had asked a question about the liquidity of a case study company that everyone else had praised. "You have a nasty mind," she told me afterward, sipping black coffee. "You look for the rot." "My family says I am pessimistic," I replied. "Your family is stupid," Renee said. "Pessimism is an emotion. What you have is diagnostic ability. You see the fracture before the bone breaks. Stop apologizing for it. Monetize it." Renee took me on as a junior associate. For 5 years. She retrained my brain. She taught me how to strip the emotion out of my intuition. "Gut feelings are garbage," she would say, pacing around her office. "Gut feelings are just indigestion. I want data. If you think someone is lying, do not tell me you feel it. Find the gap in the timeline. Find the discrepancy in the ledger. Verify, document, build the file." She taught me that information was leverage. She taught me that most people are careless because they believe they are the protagonists of their own movies. Protected by plot armor. They leave trails. They use the same passwords. They brag to the wrong people. Under Renee's tutelage, I became cold. I became precise. I stopped being the difficult daughter and became a weapon for hire. I helped corporations dodge hostile takeovers and vetted executive hires. I made good money more than Victor, though I never told him. And then I met Samuel. Samuel Burgess was 36, a structural engineer who designed bridges. He was everything the Diaz men were not. He was quiet. He was steady. He did not need to dominate a room to feel important. When he looked at me, he did not see a shadow or a disappointment. He saw melody. We met at a coffee shop where we both worked remotely on Tuesdays. He asked to borrow a charger, and we ended up talking for 3 hours about load-bearing walls and the integrity of materials. When I introduced Samuel to my family, the reaction was predictable. We went to the house in Bellevue for a Sunday brunch. Samuel brought a bottle of nice wine and a polite demeanor. Victor shook his hand loosely, barely making eye contact, before turning back to Cassidy to ask about her new boyfriend's sports car. Teresa asked Samuel what he did, and when he said, "Engineer," she said, "Oh, that is nice," with the same tone one uses for a child who draws a picture. Cassidy ignored him entirely, treating him as a non-player character in her video game. On the drive home, I braced myself. I expected Samuel to be angry or to ask why my family was so rude. Instead, he reached over and took my hand. His grip was warm and solid. "They do not want us there," he said. It was not a question. "No," I said, feeling the old shame rise up. "They do not. I am sorry." "Do not be sorry," Samuel said. "But we need to be clear about something. I am not marrying them. I am marrying you. And I do not like the way they look at you, like you are a mistake they are trying to hide." It was the first time anyone had acknowledged the reality of my existence without blaming me for it. Samuel became my anchor. He respected my boundaries. He understood why I documented everything. He understood why I checked the exits when we entered a room. He did not call me paranoid. He called me prepared. But even with Samuel, the pull of the family was strong. When the wedding invitation for Cassidy and Declan came, I felt the old obligation. I felt the need to try one last time. "You do not have to go," Samuel had said, watching me stare at the thick, cream-colored envelope. "It is my sister," I had said. "It is her wedding. Maybe this time will be different. Declan seems significant. Maybe this is a new chapter." Samuel had looked at me with sad eyes. He knew better. He had seen Declan row once, briefly, at a mixer a year ago. Though they hadn't spoken, he had a feeling about him. "Just be careful, Mel," Samuel had said. "That guy, Declan, he feels like a suit with no man inside it." I should have listened. But the child in me, the girl standing at the edge of the hallway photos, still wanted to be invited into the center. I wanted to believe that if I just showed up, dressed right, and smiled enough, the frame would widen to include me. So I went to Saltmere Bluffs. I walked into the trap, and as I stood outside in the cold sea air, clutching the evidence of their betrayal, I realized that Renee was right. You cannot fix the rot. You can only expose it. And Samuel was right too. They did not want me there. But they were about to realize that inviting the shadow was a fatal mistake, because shadows go places the light cannot reach, and shadows hear everything. The beginning of the end did not happen at the wedding. It started 6 months earlier. On a Tuesday evening in late autumn, Cassidy had summoned the family to a high-end steakhouse in downtown Bellevue. She called it a mandatory family meeting, which usually meant she needed money or attention. This time, however, the air felt different. It was charged with a frantic, vibrating energy. When I arrived, my parents were already seated. Victor was inspecting the wine list with the scrutiny of a forensic accountant, and Teresa was beaming, her face flushed with an anticipation that made her look 10 years younger. Then Cassidy walked in, and she was not alone. She was holding the arm of a man who looked like he had been manufactured in a laboratory, dedicated to creating the perfect corporate son-in-law. He was tall, with a jawline that could cut glass and hair that was swept back in a style that suggested both order and expense. He wore a navy suit that fit him with the kind of precision that costs $3,000. "Everyone," Cassidy announced, her voice trembling with theatrical joy. "This is Declan Rowe, and we are getting married." She held up her left hand. A diamond, the size of a refined sugar cube, sat on her ring finger. It caught the dim lighting of the restaurant and threw aggressive sparks across the table. Victor stood up so fast he nearly knocked over his water glass. Teresa gasped, covering her mouth with both hands. There were hugs. There were squeals. There was the popping of a champagne cork that seemed to materialize out of nowhere. I stood back, watching the performance. Then, I stepped forward to play my part. "Congratulations," I said. Declan turned to me. This was the moment. The first red. He extended a hand. His skin was dry and cool. His grip was firm, but not crushing. It was the handshake of a man who had read books on how to shake hands. But it was his eyes that triggered the alarm in the base of my skull. When you look at someone you are meeting for the first time, usually there is a moment of curiosity, a spark of connection. Declan's eyes were a flat, pale blue. They did not smile. They did not wonder who I was. They scanned me. They took in my watch, my shoes, and my bag in a single. Rapid sweep. It was an appraisal. He was calculating my net worth and my threat level in under 2 seconds. "Melody," he said. His voice was a smooth baritone, modulated to a radio-friendly frequency. "Cassidy has told me so much about you, the consultant, right?" "That is right," I said, withdrawing my hand. "Fascinating field," he said, holding my gaze just a fraction too long. "Optimization is the key to the next decade. If you are not lean, you are obsolete." It was a generic aphorism, the kind of thing you read on a motivational poster in an airport lounge, but my father ate it up. "Exactly," Victor boomed, clapping Declan on the shoulder. "That is what I keep telling her. Sit down, son. Sit down. Tell us everything. Who are you? What do you do? How did you steal my daughter's heart?" We sat, and for the next 2 hours, I watched Declan Rowe dismantle my parents' defenses with the precision of a bomb disposal technician working in reverse. He did not just talk, he pitched. He spoke in a stream of consciousness that was heavy on buzzwords and light on specifics. He told us he was in private equity and focused on distressed asset acquisition and strategic mergers. These were words that acted like an aphrodisiac for Victor. "I primarily operate out of New York and London," Declan said, swirling his Pinot Noir. "But I saw the potential in the Pacific Northwest market. There is a lot of dormant capital here. A lot of legacy businesses waiting for a liquidity event." "Liquidity event," Teresa repeated, savoring the syllables as if they were a foreign delicacy. "And when I met Cassidy," Declan continued, turning his gaze to my sister, "I knew I had found my anchor. I have spent 10 years building a portfolio. But what good is equity if you do not have a legacy to share it with?" It was perfect. Too perfect. It was a script. I stayed quiet. Cutting my steak into small, measured squares, I waited for the pause. When he finally stopped to take a breath, I jumped in. "So, which firm are you with, Declan?" I asked. "Or are you independent?" The table went quiet. Victor shot me a warning look. The tone was clear. "Do not ruin this." Declan did not blink. He smiled, a condescending tilt of the lips. "I run a boutique fund, Rowe Capital Partners. We keep a low profile. High net worth individuals prefer discretion, as you can imagine." "Of course," I said. "And before that you mentioned London. Did you work for one of the big banks there?" "I was head of the European desk for a consortium," he said quickly. "We handled cross-border acquisitions for tech startups." "Which consortium?" I asked. "It was a private group," he said, his smile tightening at the edges. Mostly Saudi and Swiss investors. We dissolved the entity in 2022 after a successful exit. That is impressive, I said. It must have been hard managing a branch like that. Where were your offices, the city or Canary Wharf? Canary Wharf, he said. I love Canary Wharf, I said. My firm did a project for a client in One Canada Square. The elevators there are a nightmare, aren't they? For a microsecond, there was a flicker in his eyes, a hesitation. Terrible, he agreed, always breaking down. I nodded and took a sip of my water. One Canada Square has some of the most reliable, high-speed lift systems in the world. They are famous for it. He was lying. I did not push it further at the table. I let the dinner proceed. I watched him flatter Teresa on her earrings. I watched him ask Victor for advice on golf clubs. Despite claiming to be a member of an exclusive club in the Hamptons, he was mirroring them, reflecting their own desires back at them. When we finally left the restaurant, Cassidy pulled me aside while Declan went to get the valet. Well, she asked, her eyes shining. Isn't he amazing? I looked at my sister. She looked desperate. She was 31, and for the last 3 years, she had watched all her friends get married. She was terrified of being left behind. Declan was not just a man to her, he was a life raft. Cass, I said gently, he is very charming, but do you know much about his work or his family? Her face hardened instantly. Here we go. I am just asking, I said. He was vague about his past, and the timeline he gave about London, it felt a little loose. You are unbelievable, Cassidy hissed. You cannot stand it, can you? You cannot stand that I found someone successful, someone who actually wears a suit and makes real money, not just someone who stares at spreadsheets all day. This is not about me, I said. I'm just saying, take it slow, do a background check, just to be safe. I do not need a background check, she snapped. I trust him. He treats me like a queen. Mom and Dad love him. Why do you always have to be the black cloud? Melody. Just be happy for me. For once. She spun around and marched toward the valet stand, where Declan was leaning against a sleek black Porsche. I watched them drive away. I noted the license plate. It was a rental. The next day. I started my file. Renee, my mentor, had taught me that every fraudster has a tell. Some talk too much, some talk too little, but mostly, they all have a problem with documentation. They want the prestige of existence without the paper trail of reality. I called Samuel. I needed a second opinion, a sanity check. I met the fiancé, I told him over the phone. And, Samuel asked, is he the second coming of Christ, as your mother predicted? He is something, I said. He drives a rental car but claims to manage a $100 million fund. He says he worked in Canary Wharf but failed a basic geography test about the building. And Samuel, his eyes, he looks at people like they are wallets. What is his name? Samuel asked. Declan Rowe. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Samuel? I asked. I am here, he said. His voice had shifted. It was tighter. Declan Rowe, you are sure? Yes. Does it ring a bell? Maybe, Samuel said slowly. I feel like I saw that name on a vendor list a few years ago. Or maybe a subcontractor dispute. I cannot place it exactly, but the name gives me a bad feeling. Mel, a really bad feeling. He feels like a shark, I said. Sharks are honest about what they are, Samuel corrected. This guy sounds like a parasite. Did you tell Cassidy? She almost bit my head off, I said. Okay, Samuel said. Then you stay back. Do not engage. If he is a con, he is dangerous. If you corner him, he will lash out. Just watch him. I took Samuel's advice. I did not confront Declan again. Instead, I observed. Over the next few months, the wedding planning went into overdrive. I saw Declan at a few more family gatherings. I noticed the pattern of isolation. One afternoon, I was at my parents' house helping Teresa with the guest list. Cassidy was there, scrolling through her phone. I want to post the engagement shoot, Cassidy complained. But Declan is being so annoying about it. What do you mean? I asked, looking up from a stack of envelopes. He will not let me post any photos of his face, Cassidy said, pouting. He says it is a security risk, because of his clients. He says high-level finance guys get targeted by hackers and kidnappers if they are too public. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. So, no face pictures? I asked. At all? I can post his hand holding mine, she said, or the back of his head, or artistic shots where he's blurry. It is so romantic, I guess, like we are in a secret agent movie, but I want to show him off. It must be hard, I said neutrally. Keeping him a secret. He says it is for our future protection, Cassidy said, parroting a line she had clearly been fed. Security risk. It was the oldest excuse in the book. Romance scammers use it, fugitives use it, bigamists use it. No legitimate hedge fund manager in the United States hides his face from his wife's social media. In fact, they usually pay publicists to ensure their faces are everywhere. I went home that night and opened my laptop. I started a spreadsheet. Column A. What Declan said. Column B. The reality. Claim owns a condo in Aspen. Reality. No property records for a Declan Row in Pitkin County. Claim graduated from Wharton. Reality, no alumni record found in the public directory under that name for the years he claimed. Claim managing partner at Row Capital. Reality Row Capital did not have a website. It did not have a LinkedIn page. It did not have a registered business entity in Washington State or New York. He was a ghost in a $3,000 suit. But the smoking gun came 2 weeks before the wedding. We were at the rehearsal dinner venue, doing a walkthrough. Declan was on his phone, pacing in the hallway. I was pretending to tie my shoe, lurking just around the corner. The acoustics in the hallway were excellent. I need the transfer by Friday, Declan was saying. His voice was different. It was not the smooth, radio-friendly baritone he used with my parents. It was sharp, aggressive, and street tough. Do not give me that excuse. I told you. The liquidity is tied up in the Aurora acquisition. Yes, Aurora Holdings. Just move the numbers around. He hung up and walked back into the room, instantly switching his smile back on like a light bulb. I waited until I was back in my car to check it. Aurora Holdings. I ran a search. There were a dozen companies with that name. I filtered by recent acquisitions. I filtered by the sectors Declan claimed to work in. Nothing fit. Then, I widened the search. I looked for Aurora in relation to fraud alerts and shell companies. And there it was. Not a company, but a lawsuit. A civil suit filed 6 months ago in Oregon against a dissolved entity called Aurora Logistics. The suit alleged that the principal partner had solicited bridge loans for a fleet of trucks that did not exist and then vanished. The principal partner was listed as D.R. O'Malley. I stared at the screen. D.R. O'Malley. Declan Row. It was a hunch. It was barely a thread. But my chest tightened with that familiar sensation, the feeling of a window opening in a pressurized room. The air was getting sucked out. He was not just lying about his resume. He was recycling his scams. He had just changed his last name, moved 1 state north, and upgraded from logistics to private equity. I closed my laptop. I sat in the dark of my home office, the glow of the streetlights filtering through the blinds. My sister was about to marry a man who did not exist. My parents were about to sign over their retirement savings to a ghost, and I was the only one who could see the strings. I thought about Samuel's warning, do not engage, but as I looked at the save-the-date magnet on my fridge, featuring a photo of Cassidy laughing while holding the hand of a headless man, I knew I could not stay back. I had the name. I had the connection. Now, I just needed the proof that would hold up in the court of Victor Diaz's ego. The notification arrived on a Wednesday morning, breaking the silence of my home office with a cheerful, 2-note chime. It was a group email from Cassidy. The subject line was decorated with emoji wedding rings and champagne glasses. Important wedding logistics. Seating updates. I opened it. expecting the usual bridal updates about shuttle schedules or weather forecasts for the island. Instead, I found a manifesto of exclusion written in a font that looked like handwriting, but was actually a commercially licensed script called Blessed Day. Hey, lovelies. As we get closer to the big day at Saltmere, Declan and I have had to make some super tough decisions regarding the guest list. You guys know how insane venue costs are because we want to ensure the highest quality experience for our VIPs, that is you. We are tightening up the seating chart. Please note, +1s are now strictly limited to married couples who are both in the bridal party or those who have received prior clearance from the groom's office. We really want to keep this intimate and focused on networking and family legacy. We are not feeding people who are just along for the ride. No freeloaders allowed at the feast, LOL. Check your personal RSVP link below to confirm your seat. I stared at the screen. No freeloaders allowed? It was a phrase that made my stomach turn. It was the kind of joke that is not a joke. It was a signal. I moved my cursor to the link and clicked. The RSVP page loaded, displaying a background photo of Cassidy and the headless Declan walking on a beach. I scrolled down to the attendance section. Name Melody Diaz. Number of guests, 1 fixed. I tried to change the number. I clicked the drop-down menu. It was grayed out. A small red text box popped up. Guest limit reached for your tier. Please contact the administrator for changes. My tier. I was the sister of the bride, and I was in a tier that did not allow me to bring my husband. I opened a new tab and checked the RSVP link for a cousin of ours, a 22-year-old who worked as a barista. I had guessed his password years ago. It was his dog's name, and I just wanted to see. His drop-down menu allowed for 2 guests. I checked another account, a friend of Cassidy's from college who was currently unemployed. Her limit was 2. It was targeted. It was a laser-guided strike designed to isolate me. They knew Samuel was my armor. They knew that with him by my side, I was calm, grounded, and harder to bully. Without him, they thought I would revert to the insecure little girl in the hallway photos. I picked up my phone to call Samuel, but it rang before I could dial. It was my mother. Did you get the email? Teresa asked. There was no greeting. No, hello, sweetheart, just the immediate, breathless anxiety of a woman managing a PR crisis. I did, I said, keeping my voice level. I noticed I cannot bring Samuel. Oh, yes, Teresa said. I could hear the sound of silverware clinking in the background. She was likely polishing the good forks, a nervous habit. Well, Melody, you have to understand, it is a very small venue. It is a ballroom that holds 300 people. Mom, I said. Yes, but Declan has so many business associates coming, she rushed on. Important people, investors from London, partners from the new firm. He needs those seats for networking. It is crucial for their future. And honestly, Samuel, well, he is lovely, but he is an engineer. He is a structural engineer, I said. He builds bridges. That is a real job. I know, she said dismissively. But he is not really in the mix, is he? He would be bored to tears. All the talk will be about equity and mergers. We thought we were doing him a favor by letting him stay home. He hates these things anyway. He is my husband, I said. We have been married for 4 years. You are inviting Cousin Ricky's girlfriend of 2 weeks, but you are excluding my husband. There was a pause. Then I heard my father's voice in the background, booming and distinct. Tell her to stop whining. Teresa, it is a business event disguised as a wedding. If Samuel wants to come, tell him to buy a tuxedo and learn what an IPO is. Otherwise, he is just taking up space. Teresa came back on the line, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Listen, Melody, your father is stressed. The wedding is costing a fortune. Just do this one thing for your sister. Come alone. Don't make a scene. Don't be difficult. Just for 1 day. Can you try not to be the victim? I am not playing the victim, I said. I am asking for basic etiquette. Etiquette is for people who pay the bills, she snapped, her mask slipping for a fraction of a second. Declan is paying for the wine. Declan is paying for the venue. He decides who sits where. If you want to come, you come alone. If not, well, that sends a message too, doesn't it? The threat hung in the air. If I didn't go, I was the jealous sister who boycotted the wedding. If I went, I was the submissive sister who accepted the humiliation. Okay, I said. I understand. Good, Teresa said, her relief palpable. I knew you would be reasonable. Oh, and wear something cheerful, not that drab gray suit you wear for your computer meetings. This is a celebration, not an audit. She hung up. I sat there for a long time, listening to the silence of the house. I looked at the empty RSVP box on the screen. Then, I went to work. I did not scream. I did not throw my phone. I channeled Renee Whitaker. I turned my anger into administration. First, I went to the registry. I bought the most expensive item on the list, a crystal vase imported from Italy that cost $400. I paid for expedited shipping. I wrote a card that said, "Can't wait to celebrate your future. Love, Melody." I wanted the paper trail of my generosity to be irrefutable. When the story of this weekend was told, no one would be able to say I was petty. Then, I opened my file on D.R. O'Malley. I needed more than just a name match. I needed a face. I spent 3 hours digging through the cached archives of the Oregon local news. The lawsuit against Aurora Logistics had been a minor scandal. Buried in the business section, there were no photos of the defendant in the articles, but then I found it, a PDF of a court docket from a preliminary hearing. It listed a physical address for the defendant's legal counsel. I cross-referenced the lawyer. He was a small-time attorney in Portland with a public Facebook page. I scrolled back 2 years on his timeline, and there, in a photo from a client appreciation golf day, was a man in a polo shirt, holding a driver and laughing. He was heavier then. His hair was different, darker, less styled, but the eyes were the same, the flat, calculating blue eyes of Declan Rowe. I saved the image. I printed it. I put it in a manila folder. Then I called Samuel. He picked up on the first ring. "I saw the email," he said. "I am sorry," I said. I tried to argue. Mom gave me the networking excuse. "It is okay," Samuel said. His voice was calm, but there was a steeliness to it that I rarely heard. "I do not want to be there if they do not want me, but I am not letting you go to that island alone, Mel." "I can handle it," I said. "I have the file." "I know you do," he said. "But you are walking into a shark tank. I am going to book a room at the bed and breakfast in town, about 5 miles from the resort. I will drive you to the venue, and I will be waiting in the car park if you need to leave. I am not going to let them corner you." "You would do that?" I asked. "Drive 4 hours just to sit in a B&B. "I would drive across the country," he said. "They can ban me from the dinner, but they cannot ban me from the island. I am your extract team." We made the plan. Samuel would be the invisible safety net. I would be the bait. 2 days before the wedding, I drove to my parents' house to drop off a dress I had borrowed from Teresa years ago, a pretext to gauge the atmosphere. The house was in chaos. Suitcases were open in the hallway. Teresa was shouting at a florist on the phone. I walked into the kitchen and saw it. It was sitting on the granite island, next to a pile of unopened mail, a thick document, bound with a black clip. The cover page read, "Family Asset Management Consolidation Agreement." I glanced at the hallway. Teresa was still yelling about hydrangeas. Victor was in the garage, loading golf clubs. I walked over to the document. I flipped it open. It was dense legal jargon, but my years of corporate consulting allowed me to scan it quickly. It was not a prenup. It was the opposite. It was a restructuring of the Diaz family estate. It proposed creating a blind trust to be managed by Rowe Capital Partners for the purpose of tax optimization and aggressive growth. I turned to the signature page. There were lines for Victor Diaz and Teresa Diaz, and there was a deadline. The date was set for the Monday after the wedding. I read the clause on page 12. The grantors. Victor and Teresa hereby grant full power of attorney regarding the liquid assets to the trustee Rowe Capital for a minimum lock-in period of 5 years. Lock-in period, 5 years. If they signed this, they wouldn't just be investing. They would be handing over the keys to their retirement, their house equity, and their savings to a man who had vanished from Oregon with a fleet of phantom trucks. Melody, I jumped. Cassidy was standing in the doorway. She was wearing a white tracksuit with the word bride written in rhinestones across the chest. She looked tired. Her eyes were rimmed with red, and she was holding a green smoothie like a weapon. "What are you doing?" she asked, her eyes darting to the document. "Just waiting for Mom," I said, stepping away from the counter. "I saw the paperwork. Is Dad investing with Declan?" Cassidy walked over and flipped the document closed. Her hand was shaking slightly. "It is a standard family trust," she said, her voice defensive. "Declan wants to help them. He says their portfolio is stagnant. He is going to triple their returns in 2 years." "Triple so?" I asked. "Cass, even the best hedge funds don't guarantee triple returns. That is aggressive." "He knows what he is doing," she snapped. "He is a genius, Melody. You would know that if you ever listened to him instead of judging him. He is doing this for us, for the family. He says once this is signed, we will never have to worry about money again." "I bet he did," I said softly. "Stop it," she hissed. "Just stop. You are jealous because Samuel can't do this for you. You are jealous because I am marrying a man who can change our entire tax bracket with one signature. Just go. Melody, go home, and don't come back until the wedding." I looked at my sister. I saw the fear behind the bravado. She was in too deep. She had built her entire identity around this wedding, around this man, and around the promise of a golden future. If she admitted even a sliver of doubt now, the whole fantasy would collapse. "Okay," I said. "I am going." I walked out of the house. I got into my car. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from adrenaline. The stakes had changed. This was no longer just about a rude email or a table behind a pillar. This was a heist in progress. Declan Rowe was planning to loot my parents for everything they had, and he was using the wedding as the distraction to get the signatures. I drove home, my mind racing. I had the photo, I had the lawsuit details, and now I knew the timeline. Monday. I had until Monday to stop them from signing their lives away, but I knew my parents. If I went to them now, waving a printout and shouting about fraud, they would shut down. They would call me hysterical. They would sign the papers just to spite me. I needed a bigger stage. I needed a moment where they couldn't look away. I needed to let the humiliation happen. I needed to let them treat me like garbage in front of everyone, to let them show their true colors, so that when I finally dropped the hammer, they would have no moral high ground left to stand on. I packed my suitcase that night. I packed the emerald green dress. I packed the clutch. And inside the zippered pocket of the bag, I placed a USB drive containing every PDF, every screenshot, and the photo of the golfer in Portland. I was going to the wedding, I was going alone, and I was going to let them think they had won, right up until the moment they lost everything. The drive to Saltmere Bluffs took 4 hours, winding through forests of Douglas fir that grew so thick they seemed to swallow the sunlight. Samuel drove the first leg, his hand resting reassuringly on the gear shift, but I insisted on driving the last 10 miles. I needed the physical sensation of control. I needed to feel the road beneath the tires. When we reached the town limits, Samuel dropped me off at the resort gate, kissing my forehead with a gravity that felt like a benediction before battle. He turned the car around toward the bed and breakfast, and I walked up the long gravel driveway alone. The resort was a study in aggressive perfection. It was a sprawling estate of gray stone and cedar, perched on a cliff overlooking the churning Pacific. The air smelled of brine and money. Inside, the lobby was transformed into a white wonderland. There were thousands of white roses, white lilies, and white hydrangeas, creating a fragrance so sweet it bordered on cloying. Crystal chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceilings, catching the gray light from the windows and shattering it into rainbows. I moved through the crowd of early arrivals. The guests were exactly who Declan had promised: men in bespoke suits discussing yield curves, and women in silk who looked at everything with a critical, appraising eye. They spoke of Cassidy not as a person, but as a brand acquisition. "She fits the portfolio," I heard a man say near the cloakroom. "Good optics for a domestic partner." I navigated toward the seating chart, which was displayed on a massive gilded mirror near the entrance to the ballroom. The calligraphy was beautiful, swirling and looped. I scanned the list. Table 1, the parents. Table 2, the groom's partners. Table 3 through 10, friends and colleagues. I read the names, my finger hovering over the glass. I checked the D section. I checked the family section. Nothing. Finally, I found it. My name was written on a small, separate card tucked into the bottom corner of the frame, almost as an afterthought. Melody Diaz. There was no table number attached to it, just the name, isolated in a sea of gold leaf. It was a cartographic insult. It said, "You are here, but you have no place." I turned away from the mirror and slipped into the back of the ballroom. The rehearsal was running late. The doors were cracked open, and I could hear voices echoing in the cavernous space. I stood in the shadows of the tech booth, watching. Cassidy was standing at the altar, looking fragile. She was wearing a white rehearsal dress, but her posture was all wrong. She was hunched over her phone, her thumbs flying across the screen. She wasn't looking at her groom. She was looking at a device, every few seconds. She would let out a laugh that was too loud, too sharp. It was the laugh of someone trying to convince an invisible audience that she was having the time of her life. Declan was not looking at her. He was screaming at the wedding coordinator. "I said no profiles," Declan barked, pointing a finger at the videographer. "Front angles only, and I want the camera cut if we go off script. Do you understand I'm paying for a wedding video, not a documentary?" "Sir, the side angle catches the light from the ocean," the videographer argued gently. "I do not care about the light," Declan snapped. "I care about the angle. If I see a camera on my left side, you are not getting paid. Is that clear?" It was a strange demand. Most grooms cared about the food or the open bar. Declan cared about the documentation. He was terrified of the wrong angle. He was managing the visual record of his own existence with the paranoia of a man who knows that facial recognition software is getting better every day. I made a note of it in my mind. Left profile. Avoids candid shots. Controlling the narrative. I slipped out before they saw me. I spent the next 2 hours in the resort library, sitting in a high-backed leather chair, watching the fog roll in off the ocean. I felt a strange sense of calm. The anxiety that had plagued me for weeks was gone, replaced by the cold, hard clarity of execution. I was not here to celebrate. I was here to witness. When the reception finally began, I entered the ballroom last. The room was a masterpiece of atmospheric design. The lighting was dim and amber, creating a warm, intimate glow. The tables were set with silver chargers and crystal stemware. Waiters moved like dancers, pouring vintage champagne. I walked to the corner. I found the pillar. I found the wooden bistro table. Seeing it in reality was different than imagining it. In my head, it was an insult. In person, it was a grotesque piece of theater. It was so stark, so obviously out of place, that it acted like a black hole, drawing the eye of anyone who happened to glance in that direction. I sat down. The chair was hard. The table wobbled slightly on the uneven carpet. The reception moved into full swing. The first dance happened, a choreographed waltz that felt mechanical. The toasts began. The best man, a guy named Chip, who I suspected Declan had hired or met a week ago, gave a speech that was entirely generic, filled with jokes about marriage that could have applied to any couple in the world. Then came the dinner service. The smell of filet mignon and truffle reduction filled the air. I watched as waiters placed plates in front of the guests at the adjacent table. The steam rose up, carrying the scent of rosemary and butter. My table remained empty. I waited. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I flagged down a passing server, a young woman with a frantic look in her eyes. "Excuse me," I said softly. "Could I get some water?" She stopped, looking at my table. then at her clipboard. She bit her lip. I am sorry. I was told this section is self-managed. Self-managed, I repeated. Does that mean I should go to the kitchen and fetch my own water? I am really sorry, she whispered, her eyes darting toward the head table. Please don't get me in trouble. The groom was very specific. It is okay, I said. Go, she fled. I sat there, my hands folded on the bare wood. I was the sister of the bride, sitting at a wedding that cost $100,000, and I could not get a glass of tap water. Then, the movement started. Cassidy stood up from the sweetheart table. She smoothed her gown. She whispered something to Declan, who laughed and kissed her hand. Then she began to make her rounds. She moved from table to table, accepting compliments, flashing the ring. She was getting closer. I could see the anticipation in her eyes. She had been waiting for this moment. This was the scene she had written in her head. She arrived at my pillar. She was flanked by two bridesmaids, who looked like they were trying to suppress giggles. Cassidy looked down at me. Her face was flushed with wine and adrenaline. Hey, sis, she said. Her voice was bright, brittle. Cassidy, I said. You look beautiful. She ignored the compliment. She gestured to the empty table. Bringing you the good food that is cute, she said. The line was delivered exactly as she had rehearsed it. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a stage whisper that carried perfectly to the table of college friends behind her. But honestly, Mel, we figured why waste the filet, she said, tilting her head. You know how you are. You probably would have complained it was undercooked. Or lectured us about the carbon footprint of the beef. So we thought we would save you the trouble. And the water, I asked. Is the water also a carbon footprint issue? Don't be dramatic, she laughed. There is a bathroom in the lobby. You can get water there. A ripple of laughter went through the group behind her. It was a cruel sound. It was the sound of a pack identifying the runt. I looked past her. I looked for my parents. Teresa was standing 10 feet away, holding court with a group of Declan's investors. She heard the laughter. She saw Cassidy standing over me. She saw the bare table. She turned her back. She picked up a canapé and examined it with intense interest, pretending the scene behind her was not happening. Victor was bolder. He saw me looking at him. He excused himself from his conversation and walked over. He did not look at Cassidy. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance. Melody, he said, his voice low. This is not working. I agree, I said. People are staring, he said. You sitting here like this, it looks bad. It looks like you are protesting. It is bringing down the mood. I am sitting where I was told to sit. Dad, I said. Well, maybe you should not be sitting here anymore, he said. He took a sip of his scotch. Honestly, Melody, if you cannot fit in, if you cannot just be normal for one night, maybe you should just go. Save yourself the embarrassment. Save us the embarrassment. The words hung there. Save us the embarrassment. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had taught me to ride a bike, the man who had paid for my braces, the man who was currently willing to sacrifice his own daughter's dignity to maintain the illusion of a perfect family for a group of strangers he wanted to impress. And in that moment, the last tether snapped. I did not feel sad. I did not feel angry. I felt light. Okay, I said. The word was soft, barely a whisper. Cassidy blinked. She had been expecting a fight. She had been expecting tears. She had wanted me to beg for a plate, or to scream, or to cause a scene that would justify her narrative that I was the unstable one. Okay, she repeated. Just okay. Yes, I said. I stood up. I picked up my clutch. I smoothed the front of my emerald dress. You are right. Dad, I said, my voice steady and clear. I should go. I would hate to ruin the aesthetic. I stepped out from behind the table. Cassidy took a step back, as if she thought I might hit her, but I just looked at her. I looked at her with the clinical detachment of a coroner examining a corpse. Good luck, Cass, I said. You are going to need it. I turned and walked away. I walked through the center of the room. I did not rush. I kept my head high. I could feel the eyes of 200 people on me. I could hear the whispers starting. Who is that? Is that the sister? Why is she leaving? As I passed a table of younger guests' cousins on my mother's side, the Gen Z contingent, I saw a phone raised. A girl with blue hair was holding her iPhone up, the camera lens pointed directly at me, then panning back to Cassidy and the empty table. The red recording light was steady. I did not hide my face. I let the camera see me. I let it see the dry eyes, the straight spine, and the calm expression. I walked out the double doors and into the cool, quiet hallway. The music from the ballroom faded to a dull thud behind me. I walked past the gallery of family photos, the shrine to the Diaz legacy. I reached the lobby and pushed through the heavy glass doors. The night air hit me, cold and wet. The fog had swallowed the world. I could not see the ocean, but I could hear it crashing against the rocks below. A rhythmic, violent sound. I pulled my phone out of my clutch. I had one text message from Samuel. I am outside. Engine is running. I walked toward the parking lot. I did not look back at the resort. I did not look back at the light spilling from the ballroom windows. They thought they had won. They thought they had successfully shamed me into disappearing. They thought the story ended with the shadow fading into the night. But as I opened the car door and slid into the warmth of the passenger seat, I felt the weight of the USB drive in my bag. They had no idea. The story was not ending. The story was just beginning. And the genre had just shifted from a tragedy to a procedural. I had just stepped out of the double doors of the ballroom. The heavy thud of the bass vibrating against my back. The lobby was empty, save for the concierge desk at the far end, and the oversized floral arrangements that smelled like a funeral home. I tightened my grip on my clutch, my knuckles turning white. I was heading for the exit, for the cold air, for the safety of the car where I thought my husband was waiting, but he was not in the car. Samuel Burgess was standing in the center of the lobby, right beneath the crystal chandelier. He looked nothing like the other guests. He was not wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing dark denim jeans, heavy leather boots, and a charcoal gray utility jacket over a black t-shirt. His hair was windblown, as if he had driven the last 10 miles with the windows down. He looked out of place in the pristine, white marble luxury of the Saltmere Bluffs resort. He looked like a piece of rebar in a room full of spun glass. I stopped. The breath left my lungs. "Samuel," I said. "You said you were in the parking lot." "I lied," he said. His voice was rough, low. He did not smile. He walked toward me, his boots echoing on the marble floor. I got to the gate, and I realized I could not do it. I could not sit in the dark while they sat in there and laughed at you. He stopped 2 feet away from me. He looked at the emerald dress. He looked at my face, scanning for tears. He found none, but he saw the tension in my jaw, the way my shoulders were locked tight near my ears. "Did they do it?" he asked. "The table." "Yes," I said. "And the food?" "No food," I said. "Self-managed." Samuel's jaw tightened. A muscle in his cheek jumped. He looked past me, toward the closed doors of the ballroom. I could hear the muffled sound of a best man's speech starting, followed by a ripple of polite laughter. "Okay," Samuel said. He looked back at me. His eyes were dark, intense, and terrifyingly calm. "We have a choice. Mel, right now, you are holding the drive. You have the evidence. We can get in the car, drive back to Seattle, send the email to the lawyers on Monday, and burn them down from a distance." He paused, tilting his head slightly toward the ballroom doors. "Or," he said, "we can go back in there, we can walk into that room, and we can finish it right now, face to face, while the lights are on." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had been excluded, erased, and disrespected by my family for 4 years. He was not asking me to leave. He was offering me a weapon. "Quietly," I asked, "or loudly?" "However you want," he said. "But I am not waiting in the car anymore." I thought about the table behind the pillar. I thought about the waiter who was too afraid to pour me water. I thought about Cassidy's smirk and my father's dismissal. I am tired of being quiet, I said. Samuel nodded. It was a sharp, decisive movement. Good. He offered me his arm. I took it. It felt solid, real. We turned around. We walked back toward the double doors. The concierge looked up, startled by Samuel's attire. But Samuel did not even glance at him. He pushed the doors open with one hand, holding them wide for me. We stepped back into the ballroom. The atmosphere inside had shifted. The dinner service was in full swing. The clatter of silverware against china was loud. The best man was just finishing his toast, raising a glass to a love that conquers all. We did not sneak in. We walked straight down the center aisle. The visual contrast was jarring. In a sea of black ties and silk gowns, Samuel looked like an intruder. He walked with a heavy, purposeful stride. His eyes scanning the room, I walked beside him, my head high, my hand resting on his forearm. The room went quiet in waves. First the tables near the door, then the middle section, and finally, the head table. People stopped chewing. Forks hovered halfway to mouths. The silence spread like a contagion until the only sound was the hum of the air conditioning. We stopped. We did not go to my corner. We stopped in the open space between the family tables and the dance floor. We were center stage. Teresa was the first to react. She stood up, her napkin falling to the floor. Her face went pale, the color draining away so fast it looked like a magic trick. She stared at Samuel, then at me. This was not the script. The script was that Melody leaves in shame. The script was that Melody is alone. The script did not include a husband who looked ready to dismantle the building beam by beam. "Melody," Teresa whispered, though in the silence, it sounded like a shout. "What are you doing?" Before I could answer, a voice boomed from table 2, the VIP table. "Melody Diaz." It was a deep, gravelly voice. A man stood up. He was in his 60s, with silver hair and a suit that cost more than my first car. It was Darius Klein. My breath caught. Darius Klein was the CEO of a transnational shipping conglomerate. 3 years ago, I had consulted for his company during a massive supply chain breakdown. I had saved him millions of dollars by identifying a redundancy in his distribution network that his own board had missed. I did not know he was a friend of Declan's, or perhaps he was one of the investors Declan was trying to court. Darius stepped out from his table. Pushing past a waiter, he looked genuinely confused. "It is you," Darius said, walking toward me with a wide smile. "I thought I saw you earlier, but you were sitting back there behind the fern." He gestured toward the pillar in the corner. I asked the waiter why the best logistics mind on the West Coast was sitting at a table with no tablecloth. Darius continued, his voice carrying easily across the room. "And he told me the table was self-managed. I have been sitting here for 20 minutes trying to figure out if that is some new avant-garde dining concept I'm too old to understand." The room went deadly silent. Darius Klein had just asked the question that everyone had been thinking but was too polite to voice. But because he was Darius Klein, a billionaire, a titan of industry, his confusion validated the absurdity of the situation. He wasn't mocking me. He was pointing out the insult. Victor stood up. He looked flustered. He smoothed his tie, forcing a smile that looked painful. "Darius," Victor said, his voice tight. "There has been a misunderstanding. Melody arrived late. We were just sorting out the seating arrangements." "Sorting it out?" Darius asked, looking at the empty wooden table in the corner. "Victor, she is your daughter, and she is brilliant. She fixed my Singapore hub in 3 weeks. Why is she sitting in the dark with no water?" The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Guests started to turn. Heads swiveled toward the corner table. They looked at the bare wood. They looked at the pillar blocking the view. Then they looked at Cassidy and Declan at the sweetheart table. The illusion of the perfect wedding cracked. This wasn't a logistical error. This was cruelty. And now, thanks to Darius, it was public cruelty. Cassidy looked like she was about to be sick. She gripped Declan's hand, her eyes darting around the room. Seeing the judgment forming on the faces of her guests, that was when Samuel stepped forward. He let go of my arm and took one step toward the head table. He did not yell. He did not look crazy. He looked incredibly, dangerously calm. "She is sitting there because she was told to," Samuel said. His voice was not loud, but it had a resonance that filled the room. "She is sitting there because my name was removed from the guest list, because she was told that her husband, an engineer, was not important enough to be here." He looked at Teresa. "You told her I would not fit in," Samuel said. "You told her I was not in the mix. So I am here to ask you, Teresa, am I fitting in now?" Teresa opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked at the guests, at the shocked faces of her friends, at the horrified expression of the wedding planner standing in the corner. The narrative of the supportive family dealing with a difficult daughter had just been incinerated. "Who are you?" The voice came from the sweetheart table. It was Declan. Declan Rowe was standing up, but he did not look like the arrogant, controlling groom I had seen in the rehearsal. He looked like a trapped animal. His face was slick with sweat. His eyes were wide, fixed on Samuel with a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. Samuel turned his head slowly to look at Declan. "I am Samuel Burgess," he said. "I am her husband." Declan blinked. He took a step back, bumping into his chair. It scraped loudly against the floor. "I don't know you," Declan said quickly. Too quickly. "I have never met you. You are crashing my wedding. Security. Where is security?" "You have met me," Samuel said. He took another step forward. "We have never shaken hands, Declan, but we have been in the same room, 3 years ago, in Portland." The color drained from Declan's face. It was instantaneous. It was the reaction of a man who hears a sound in the dark that he has been dreading for years. "I don't know what you are talking about," Declan stammered. He looked at Victor. "Victor, get him out of here. He is crazy. He is ruining the night." But Victor did not move. He was looking at Declan. He was looking at the fear in his future son-in-law's eyes. Victor was a snob, but he was also a businessman. He knew what panic looked like, and Declan looked panicked. Samuel did not back down. He stood his ground, a figure of dark denim and justice in the center of the white room. "I was a structural consultant on a warehouse project," Samuel said, his voice steady, reciting the facts. "A warehouse that never got built, because the logistics company that hired the subcontractors vanished overnight with the deposit money. Aurora Logistics." A gasp went through the room. It was faint, but audible. Declan's hands started to shake. He tried to pick up his wine glass, but his fingers were trembling so badly he had to set it back down. "That is a coincidence," Declan said, his voice cracking. "I have never heard of that company." "Really?" Samuel asked. "Because the general contractor on that job was a friend of mine, and he showed me the file on the guy who ran it. He showed me the photos from the site visits. The guy had a different name then, D.R. O'Malley." Samuel paused. He let the name hang in the air. "But he had the same face," Samuel said, "and the same pitch." The silence in the room was absolute. It was a vacuum. No one moved. No one breathed. The only sound was the wind howling outside the windows, battering against the glass. Cassidy pulled her hand away from Declan's. She looked at him, her eyes wide with fear. "Declan," she whispered. "What is he talking about?" Declan turned to her. A desperate, frozen smile plastered on his face. "Baby, he is lying. He is Melody's husband. You know how she is. They are trying to sabotage us. They are jealous. Just ignore him." "I am not talking about a rumor." "Declan," Samuel said. He reached into his jacket pocket. Declan flinched. He actually flinched, as if he thought Samuel was pulling out a gun, but Samuel did not pull out a gun. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a single sheet, printed from a PDF. "I know you," Samuel said softly. "Not from a party, not from a golf course. I know you from a police report." He dropped the paper on the floor. It fluttered down and landed face up on the carpet. It was the photo of the man in the polo shirt, laughing on a golf course, labeled Exhibit A Defendant D.R. O'Malley. Melody has the rest, Samuel said. Looking at me, all eyes turned to me. I stood there, the emerald dress shimmering under the lights, the clutch heavy in my hand. I did not look at my parents. I did not look at Cassidy. I looked straight at Declan, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't the shadow, I was the sun. And he was about to burn. The piece of paper Samuel had dropped lay on the carpet like a landmine. It was a simple printout, grainy from being enlarged, but the face was undeniable. It was Declan, heavier, younger, wearing a polo shirt and a smile that I recognized instantly, the smile of a man who thinks he has gotten away with something. Declan stared at the photo. His chest heaved, a short, sharp intake of breath that sounded too loud in the silent room. He looked up at Samuel, and for a second, the mask of the sophisticated financier slipped completely. His lip curled, revealing a flash of teeth that looked feral. "This is ridiculous," Declan spat, though his voice lacked its usual resonant depth. It was thin, reedy. "It is a photo of a guy playing golf. What, you found a doppelganger? You think you can come into my wedding, on my dime, and slander me with a Google image search?" Samuel did not raise his voice. He didn't have to. He just took another step forward, encroaching on the personal space of the groom. "It is not just a photo, Declan," Samuel said. "It is an exhibit from a deposition, and I remember the address of that warehouse project, 142 Southeast Hawthorne Boulevard, Suite B, Portland, Oregon." Declan blinked. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. "I have properties all over the West Coast," Declan stammered, looking toward Victor for support. "I cannot remember every single address in my portfolio." "You would remember this one," Samuel said, his voice cutting through the air like a diamond saw. "Because it was not a warehouse. It was a mailbox inside a 24-hour laundromat. I went there looking for my paycheck. The woman running the wash and fold told me that Mr. O'Malley usually picked up his mail on Tuesday nights, wearing a hoodie and sunglasses." A murmur rippled through the room. It started at the back tables and washed forward like a tide. Laundromat, mailbox, hoodie. These were not words that belonged in the Saltmere Bluffs resort. They were words that stained. Cassidy was staring at Declan. Her hand was still hovering near his arm, but she wasn't touching him anymore. She looked like she had been slapped. Her makeup, so carefully applied by a team of professionals 3 hours ago, could not hide the pallor of her skin. "Declan," she whispered, "you said you lived in a penthouse in the Pearl District when you were in Portland." "I did," Declan snapped, turning on her with a ferocity that made her flinch. "I did. Cass, this guy is a contractor, a disgruntled laborer. He is confusing me with some low-level developer. Look at me. Do I look like a guy who picks up mail in a laundromat?" He spread his arms wide, showcasing his $3,000 tuxedo. It was a desperate move. He was trying to use the costume to prove the character, but the audience was no longer buying the ticket. Then, Darius Klein moved. The silver-haired CEO walked away from his VIP table. He did not look at Declan. He walked straight to where I was standing. He stopped in front of me, ignoring the chaos, ignoring the groom who was unraveling 5 feet away. "Melody," Darius said. His voice was warm, authoritative, and loud enough to be heard in the lobby. "I apologize. I should have come over sooner. I assumed, wrongly, that your family understood who you were." He turned slowly to face Victor and Teresa. My parents were standing by their table, frozen. Victor looked like he was having a stroke. His face was a map of confusion and dawning humiliation. Teresa was clutching her pearls so hard I thought the string might snap. "Victor," Darius said, "I heard you say earlier that Melody should leave to avoid embarrassing the family." Victor opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked at Darius, a man he idolized, a man whose net worth was 50 times his own, and he withered. "Let me tell you something," Darius continued, addressing the room. 3 years ago, my company was facing a crisis. We had a massive internal fraud ring in our procurement division. We were bleeding $40 million a quarter. Our stock was tanking. I hired 3 different audit firms. They found nothing. He pointed a hand at me. Then I hired Melody, he said. She did not come in with a team of 20 lawyers. She came in with a laptop and a thermos of coffee. She sat in a cubicle for 3 weeks, and she found it. She traced a pattern of shell vendors that everyone else had missed. She saved 800 jobs that month. 800 families kept their paychecks because your daughter knows how to look at a spreadsheet and see the truth. Darius looked at the empty wooden table in the corner, then back at my mother. She is the sharpest crisis manager I have ever met, Darius said. And you have her sitting at a table with no water. If she were my daughter, she would be sitting at the head of the room. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the sound of a paradigm shifting. I watched my parents. For 34 years, they had looked at me and seen a failure. They had seen a woman who worked from home, who didn't have a real job, who was difficult and suspicious. Now, a man they considered a god was telling them that they were the blind ones. Teresa looked at me. Her eyes were wide, wet, and terrified. She wasn't seeing Melody the shadow anymore. She was seeing a stranger, a powerful, respected stranger that she had accidentally thrown away. We didn't know, Teresa whispered. She never talks about work. She talks, Samuel said, stepping up beside me. You just never listen. The guests were whispering openly now. The narrative had flipped. I could hear snippets of conversation from the nearby tables. Did you hear that saved the company? Why is she sitting in the corner? The parents are awful. Look at them. Who is this groom anyway? Declan heard the whispers too. He could feel the room turning against him, not just as a suspected fraud, but as a man who had aligned himself with bad parents against a hero. He needed a scapegoat. He needed to deflect. He pointed a shaking finger at the wedding coordinator, who was cowering near the kitchen doors. This is a setup, Declan shouted. The seating. The table. I didn't order that. This is sabotage. The staff is incompetent. They messed up the chart, and now they are trying to blame me. The coordinator, a woman named Sarah, who had been running around with a headset all night, snapped. She had taken enough abuse during the rehearsal. I am not incompetent, she yelled back. Stepping into the light, she pulled an iPad out of her apron pocket. I have the change order right here. It came in 3 days ago. Specific instruction regarding guest Melody Diaz, remove place setting, designate as self-managed, place behind structural column. It was marked urgent. I never sent that, Declan roared. It didn't come from you, Sarah said, tapping the screen. It came from the bride's email address. The air left the room. I turned to Cassidy. She was standing alone now. Declan had backed away from her. She looked small, lost in the acres of white tulle. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. No, Cassidy sobbed. I swear, Mel, I didn't write that. I know I made the joke, but I wouldn't starve you. I wouldn't put you behind a pole. It came from CassidyDiazWrites@gmail, Sarah insisted, holding up the tablet. I walked over to the coordinator. Show me, I said. Sarah handed me the iPad. I looked at the email. The subject line was urgent seating adjustment. The sender was indeed Cassidy, but I looked closer. I tapped on the header information to expand the metadata. Renee taught me to check the timestamps, I said. Mostly to myself. I looked at the date and time. Wednesday, 4 a.m. Cassidy, I said, looking up. Where were you on Wednesday morning? I was asleep. She wept. I was at the hotel. We had the spa day. Where was your phone? I asked. It was charging, she said. In the living room of the suite. I looked at Declan. He had gone very still. And who else was in the suite? Cassidy, I asked. She looked at Declan. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Her eyes went wide. You, she whispered, staring at her husband. You were up early. You said you had a conference call with London. You were in the living room. Don't be stupid, Cass, Declan sneered. Why would I do that? Why would I treat your sister like that? Because you needed me to leave, I said. I handed the iPad back to Sarah and turned to face him. You didn't just want to be mean. Declan, you aren't a high school bully. You are a tactician. You knew that if I was humiliated enough, if I was starved and ignored and mocked, I would leave. I would walk out. And if I walked out, I wouldn't be around on Monday. Monday? Victor asked, his voice trembling. What is Monday? The signing. Dad, I said without looking at him. The family asset management agreement, the one where you hand over power of attorney to Roe Capital Partners for 5 years. Declan's face twisted. He looked like a cornered rat. That is standard estate planning. I'm trying to help this family. You sent that email, I said to Declan, my voice steady. Because you know that I am the only person in this room who reads the footnotes. You know that I check the registration numbers. You knew that if I stayed, I would see the paperwork. So you used Cassidy's email to turn me into a pariah. You used my parents' vanity against them. You turned my sister into a villain so you could rob her inheritance. Cassidy let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. She looked at Declan with pure horror. You sent it, she screamed. You made me look like a monster to my own sister. You are a monster, Declan shouted, losing all control. You are a spoiled, shallow little brat who cares more about the flowers than the bank account. You made it easy. You all made it easy. You are so desperate to be rich, so desperate to look important. You didn't check a single thing I told you. He looked around the room, his eyes wild. He realized he had said too much. He realized the silence wasn't shock anymore. It was the gathering of a storm. Samuel stepped closer to me. He handed me the manila folder he had been holding. I held it up. I have the rest of the file here. Declan, I said. Or should I call you Daniel or David? I have the list of the other families. I have the shell companies. And I have the phone number of the district attorney in Oregon who has an open warrant for a man matching your description. Declan looked at the folder. He looked at the exits. You married the wrong person to play this game, I said. You thought you were marrying the golden child. You forgot she had a sister who lives in the dark. Declan laughed. It was a high, broken sound. You have nothing, he said, backing away toward the kitchen doors. This is slander. I am going to sue you. I am going to sue all of you. I need to call my lawyer. He didn't wait for a response. He turned and ran. He didn't walk with the dignity of a CEO. He sprinted, his dress shoes slipping on the polished marble, bursting through the swinging doors into the kitchen, fleeing from the truth that was chasing him down. The doors swung shut behind him, oscillating back and forth. The ballroom was silent. I stood there, holding the folder. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel happy. I looked at Cassidy, who was collapsed on the floor in her white dress, weeping into her hands. I looked at my parents, who stood like statues amidst the wreckage of their pride. I felt tired. He is running, Samuel said quietly beside me. Let him run, I said. There is nowhere to go on an island, but as I looked at Victor, I realized the real damage hadn't been done by Declan. It had been done years ago. In the hallway with the photos, at the dinner table with the dismissals, Declan was just the symptom. The disease was standing right in front of me, wearing a tuxedo and looking at me as if he was seeing me for the very first time. And I knew, with a sinking feeling, that the hardest part wasn't exposing the con artist. It was going to be dealing with the people he left behind. The internet does not care about nuance. It does not care about family history, or complex psychological dynamics, or the slow erosion of self-esteem over 3 decades. The internet cares about contrast. It craves the visual shorthand of good versus evil. And that night in the ballroom, Cassidy had handed them a masterpiece of villainy on a silver platter. It started with the girl with the blue hair. Her name was distinct in the digital ecosystem, something like Gen Z truth teller, and she had uploaded the clip before the first police car even arrived at the resort. The video was only 14 seconds long. It was shaky, shot vertically from a low angle, but the audio was crystal clear. Bringing you the good food, that is cute. The camera panned from Cassidy's sneering face illuminated by the soft, flattering lighting of the ballroom to the empty wooden table behind the pillar. Then it panned to me. The woman in the green dress, sitting in the shadows, spine straight, hands folded on the bare wood. By the time Samuel and I crossed the bridge back to the mainland, the clip had 50,000 views. By the time we reached the outskirts of Seattle, it had hit 1 million. By the next morning, it was everywhere. They called it Tablegate. I sat in my living room with Samuel, watching the world dissect my family. It was a surreal, out-of-body experience. Strangers from Ohio and London and Brisbane were leaving comments that ranged from furious to hilarious. That bride has main character syndrome, but the sister has main character energy. The way the sister just stood up and walked away, queen behavior, I would have flipped the table. She is better than me. But then, the internet detectives went to work. They found the registry. They found the no freeloaders clause on the website. They found old photos of the Diaz family where I was standing half out of the frame. They built a timeline of exclusion that was terrifyingly accurate. They stripped away the veneer of the perfect Diaz family and revealed the rot underneath. For Victor and Teresa, this was worse than bankruptcy. This was a loss of face on a global scale. Cassidy was the first to vanish. She deleted her Instagram, then her Facebook, then her LinkedIn. Her phone number was disconnected by Sunday noon. She had wanted to be famous, to be the star of the show. Now she was a meme for cruelty. A screenshot of her face, mid-sneer, was being used as a reaction image for everything from bad customer service to political scandals. Declan Rowe had simply ceased to exist. He had run out of the kitchen, stolen a catering van which was later found abandoned near the ferry terminal, and evaporated into the mist. The police were looking for him, but Dr. O'Malley knew how to disappear. He had practice. My parents, however, could not disappear. They had a house in Bellevue. They had a reputation. They had a country club membership. On Tuesday, 3 days after the wedding, my mother called me. I looked at the phone buzzing on the coffee table. Samuel was sitting next to me, reading a book. But I saw his eyes shift to the screen. "You do not have to answer that," he said. "I know," I said. I picked it up. I put it on speaker. "Melody." Teresa's voice was ragged. She sounded like she had been crying for 48 hours straight. There was no greeting, no apology, no, "Are you okay after your husband almost got into a fistfight with a con artist?" "I am here, Mom," I said. "You have to do something," she said. Her voice rose in a panic. "It is out of control. People are leaving reviews on your father's business page. They are calling the house. Someone threw eggs at the driveway this morning." "Eggs," Melody. "At our house." "That sounds stressful," I said, my voice flat. "Stressful. It is a nightmare," she cried. "You need to issue a statement. You need to go online and tell them it was a joke. Tell them it was an inside joke between sisters. Tell them you asked to sit there. Just fix it. You are good at fixing things. Darius said you fix crises. Fix this." I closed my eyes. Even now, after everything, she still viewed me as a utility. I was not a person to be comforted. I was a tool to be used. "I cannot do that, Mom," I said. "Why not?" she snapped, the old edge returning to her voice. "Because you are enjoying this. You are enjoying seeing us humiliated." "Because it would be a lie," I said. "And because I do not work for you." "We are your family," she screamed. "We raised you. We gave you everything." "You gave me a table behind a pillar," I said. "And you stood there and watched while Cassidy laughed at me. You didn't say a word. Mom, you just drank your wine." "I was in shock," she protested. "I didn't know what to do." "You knew exactly what to do," I said. "You just chose not to do it because you thought Declan was going to make you rich. And now that he's gone, you want me to clean up the mess." "Please," she whispered. It was the first time I had ever heard her beg. He is not handling it well. "I am hanging up now," I said. "Melody, Wait, the bills the landscaper came today and said the card was declined. And the roof repair for the garage. You usually handle the scheduling. I looked at Samuel. He gave a small, grim nod. For 10 years. I had been quietly subsidizing my parents' lifestyle. It wasn't direct cash handouts. Victor's ego would never allow that. It was the invisible things. I paid the property tax supplement every year and told them it was a government rebate. I paid the landscapers directly and said I had a coupon. I paid for the HVAC repairs, the pool maintenance, the upgrades to their security system. I did it because I wanted them to love me. I thought if I made their lives perfect, they would eventually notice I was the one holding the umbrella. I canceled the auto payments. Mom, I said. Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. What? She breathed. The landscaper, the pool guy, the property tax account, the contractor fixing the garage roof. I canceled all of it on Monday morning. But why? She asked, genuinely confused. You always take care of that. I am cutting costs, I said. You know how it is? No freeloaders allowed? I hung up. It was petty. It was vindictive. And it felt like setting down a backpack full of rocks that I had been carrying since I was 22. The fallout continued. Victor tried to save face the only way he knew how, by attacking. He gave an interview to a local business journal. Trying to spin the narrative, he claimed that I was emotionally unstable and that the self-managed table was a therapeutic measure suggested by my doctor to help me with social anxiety. He tried to paint me as the fragile, broken daughter that he and Teresa had heroically supported. It backfired spectacularly. The internet sleuths found the video of Samuel confronting Declan. They heard Darius Klein, a man whose reputation was unassailable, praising me. They juxtaposed Victor's lies with the footage of me calmly walking out of the ballroom. The comment section on the article was a bloodbath. This father is gaslighting his own daughter in print. Narcissism is a hell of a drug. Imagine having a daughter who saves Fortune 500 companies and treating her like an embarrassing secret. Then came the financial hit. Victor ran a boutique consultancy firm. His clients were old-school men who valued loyalty and image. One of his biggest accounts was with a man named Mitchell Thorne, a real estate developer who had been with Victor for 20 years. I heard about the meeting from an old colleague. Mitchell had walked into Victor's office on Thursday morning. He didn't sit down. He didn't accept the offer of coffee. "We are moving our account, Victor," Mitchell had said. "Because of a wedding video," Victor had sputtered, his face turning purple. "Mitchell, be serious. That is teenage drama. It has nothing to do with business." "It has everything to do with judgment," Mitchell had replied. "You let a con artist into your house. You almost signed over your power of attorney to a man who doesn't exist. You have no due diligence. Victor, and the way you treated your daughter, the one who actually has the brains, it speaks to character. If you can't manage your own family, you can't manage my assets. It is a reputational risk." Victor lost 30% of his revenue in 10 minutes, for the first time in his life. The judgment he had wielded like a weapon against me was turned back on him. He was being measured, and he was found wanting. Meanwhile, my phone was ringing, but not with hate mail. Renee Whitaker called me on Friday. "You are trending," she said, her voice dry and amused. "I have had 5 calls this morning. People want the woman in the green dress." "I am not a mascot." "Renee," I said. "No, you are a brand," she corrected. "They saw you in that video. They saw you stay calm while everyone else was losing their minds. They saw you walk away with dignity. Corporate boards love that. They are terrified of chaos. They want someone who can look a disaster in the eye and not blink. You have 3 new job offers. One of them is a retainer for double your current rate." I took the jobs. I didn't take them to prove anything to my parents. I took them because I was good at them. I took them because, for the first time, people were hiring me for who I was, not despite who I was. Samuel became the gatekeeper. When Teresa tried to show up at our house in Tacoma, Samuel met her at the driveway. He didn't yell. He didn't make a scene. He just stood there, arms crossed, a physical wall between the Diaz toxicity and our sanctuary. She is not seeing you, Samuel told her. I am her mother, Teresa wailed, standing by her car. I need to explain. You had 34 years to explain, Samuel said. Go home. Teresa, go home and look at the photos in your hallway. Maybe you will finally see what you missed. He turned and walked back into the house, leaving her standing in the rain. It felt like victory. It felt like the closing credits of a movie where the hero finally gets peace. We had the new clients. We had the moral high ground. We had cut the toxic cords. But real life is not a movie. And villains do not just disappear because they have been humiliated. They disappear to regroup. It was late on a Sunday night, almost 2 weeks after the wedding. The rain was hammering against the windows of our living room. Samuel was asleep upstairs. I was in the kitchen, making a cup of tea, enjoying the silence. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text message. The number was blocked. I picked it up, expecting another spam message or maybe a late-night plea from Cassidy, who had been trying to email me from a new address. I opened the message. There were no words at first, just an image. It was a photo taken from the street, looking through the window of a house, my house. It showed me, sitting on the sofa earlier that evening, reading a book. The angle was from the bushes near the side gate. My blood ran cold. The cup of tea in my hand trembled, hot liquid splashing onto my wrist. Then, a second message bubbled up. You think you are smart because you can read a spreadsheet. But you forgot the first rule of the game: never corner a man who has nothing left to lose. Stop digging. Stop talking to the police. Stop helping the DA find the money trail. A third message followed immediately. If you don't stop, everything you and the engineer have built will burn. And I am not talking about a metaphor. I stared at the screen. The text was not from a troll. It was not from a bot. It was from Declan. He wasn't running anymore. He was watching. I looked out the kitchen window into the dark, wet backyard. The shadows of the trees looked different now. They didn't look like shelter. They looked like hiding places. I set the phone down. I walked over to the back door and checked the lock. I checked the deadbolt. Then I checked the window latches. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clicking into gear. Pattern recognition. He was escalating. He was desperate. A con man who runs is looking for a new mark. A con man who stays to threaten the whistleblower is looking for revenge. I turned off the kitchen light, plunging the room into darkness so I couldn't be seen from the outside. He thought this text would scare me into silence. He thought the threat of fire would make me retreat back into the shadows. He was wrong. I went upstairs and woke Samuel. He is here, I whispered. Samuel woke up instantly, his eyes clear. Who? Declan, I said. And he wants to play. I showed him the phone. Samuel read the text. He didn't panic. He reached into the nightstand and pulled out his own phone. Call the detective, Samuel said. I will check the perimeter. Samuel, I said, grabbing his arm. He said he would burn it down. Let him try, Samuel said. He forgets that I build things to withstand stress, and you know how to dismantle them. We were not the victims in the ballroom anymore. We were a team. And if Declan Rowe wanted a war, he was going to find out that the engineer and the analyst were a lot more dangerous than a family of narcissists. The rain in Tacoma was different from the rain at the resort. At Saltmere, the rain had felt dramatic, like a special effect for a tragedy. Here, in the driveway of my modest craftsman house, it was just wet, cold, and relentless. It was the kind of rain that soaked through your coat in seconds, leaving you shivering and miserable. That was exactly how my mother looked when I opened the door on Tuesday evening. Teresa Diaz stood on my porch, her hair plastered to her skull, her expensive trench coat darkened by water. She did not have an umbrella. She looked small, which was a jarring sight. In my memory, and in the family photos, Teresa was always looming, occupying space with her perfume and her judgments. Now, she looked like a wet bird that had flown into a window. Samuel stood behind me, his hand resting on the small of my back. I could feel the tension radiating off him. He wanted to close the door. He wanted to protect our fortress. But I stepped aside. Come in, I said. Teresa stepped into the hallway. dripping onto the hardwood. She did not say thank you. She did not ask how I was doing, even though she knew a dangerous man had threatened to burn my house down less than 48 hours ago. She turned to me, her mascara running in dark streaks down her cheeks. "You have to stop," she said. Her voice was a ragged whisper. "Melody, please, you have to stop talking to the lawyers. You have to stop posting on social media. You are destroying us." I looked at her. "I have not posted anything since the wedding. Mom, the internet is doing that on its own." "You could stop it," she cried, her voice rising to a shriek. "You could issue a statement. You could say you were mistaken. You could say, Declan is a good man who was misunderstood. The bank is freezing our accounts. Melody, the club is threatening to revoke our membership because of the scandal. Do you know what it is like to walk into the grocery store and have people stare at you? Do you know what it is like to be a laughingstock?" I watched her cry. I waited for the question. I waited for her to ask, "Are you safe? Did he hurt you? Are you okay?" The question never came. "Declan Rowe is a criminal," I said, my voice steady. "He is wanted in Oregon for fraud. He is currently stalking me. He sent a threat to this phone 2 nights ago saying he would burn my house down. And you are worried about your country club membership." Teresa blinked. She looked genuinely confused, as if I had started speaking a foreign language. "He is just upset," she said dismissively. "He is a businessman. Melody, men like that get aggressive when they are cornered, but he is not an arsonist. He is family, or he was going to be family. If you just drop the investigation, if you just let him go, he will calm down, and maybe he will come back and fix the accounts." I felt a cold, hollow sensation in my chest. It was the death of the final, lingering hope that my mother might actually be a mother. "He is not coming back to fix the accounts, Mom," I said. "He is coming back to finish draining them, and I am not dropping anything." "You are so selfish," she screamed, stomping her foot like a toddler. "It is always about you being right. You want to win. You want to see Cassidy ruined. You want to see us suffer because you are jealous that we never loved you the way we loved her." The words hung in the air. She had said the quiet part out loud. She clamped her hand over her mouth, but it was too late. The truth was out, naked and ugly in my hallway. "Get out," Samuel said. His voice was low, vibrating with a rage I had never heard before. He stepped in front of me, shielding me from her. "Samuel, please," Teresa stammered, realizing she had gone too far. "I didn't mean—" "Get out of my house," Samuel repeated. "Before I call the police and have you trespassed. You are not a mother. You are a liability." Teresa fled. She ran out into the rain, sobbing, climbing into her Mercedes and speeding away. I watched her go. I felt Samuel's arms wrap around me, holding me tight. I didn't cry. I was done crying for them. 2 hours later, there was another knock at the door. This time, it was faint, hesitant. I looked at the security camera feed on my phone. A figure was standing on the porch, huddled in a hoodie that was 2 sizes too big. It was Cassidy. I opened the door. My sister was unrecognizable. She was not wearing her signature heels. She was wearing dirty sneakers and sweatpants. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, revealing dark circles under her eyes that looked like bruises. She was shivering violently. "I didn't know where to go," she whispered. Her teeth were chattering. "Mom and Dad, they are screaming at each other. Dad threw a vase at the wall. I couldn't stay there." "Come in," I said. She walked in. She looked at Samuel, terrified he would throw her out. But Samuel just went to the kitchen and started making hot chocolate. He knew the difference between a predator and a victim, even if the victim had once been a bully. We sat in the living room. Cassidy held the mug with both hands, the steam rising into her face. "He told me he would make us A-list," Cassidy said, her voice hollow. "He said the Diazes were provincial. He said we had potential, but we were thinking too small. He said if I signed the papers, He would leverage Dad's assets and turn us into a dynasty, like the Kardashians, but with class. What papers did you sign, Cass? I asked gently. I don't know, she sobbed. Investment things, joint ventures. He brought them to me at night, when I was tired. He said it was just formalities for the wedding portfolio. He said if I didn't sign them, it meant I didn't trust him. He said, she choked on a sob. He said if I didn't trust him, he would leave me, and I was so scared of being alone. Mel, I was so scared of being 31 and single. I need to see the papers, I said. And your phone, and your laptop. Cassidy hugged her bag to her chest. He said he would kill me if I showed anyone. He said he has videos, private videos. He is lying, I said. He uses fear as a currency, but right now, the only way out is through. You can stay here tonight. Cassidy, you can sleep in the guest room, but I have conditions. I leaned forward. I let the big sister persona drop and the crisis manager take over. No more lies, I said. No more protecting Mom and Dad's feelings. You give me everything, every email, every text, every document. If you hide one thing from me, you are on the street. Do you understand? Cassidy nodded. She handed me her bag. For the next 6 hours, my living room became a war room. Renee Whitaker joined us via secure video link on the big screen. Samuel sat at the dining table, scanning documents. I went through Cassidy's digital life. It was a mess. Declan had groomed her perfectly. He had isolated her, fed her delusions of grandeur, and then used her to access the family vault. But as we pieced together the paper trail, something didn't add up. Look at this, Renee said, her voice crackling through the speakers. The structure of the trust he was trying to get Victor to sign. It is not a general power of attorney. It is specific. I looked at the clause Renee had highlighted on the screen. The trustee shall have exclusive rights to manage, liquidate, or leverage the assets held within the Vista Point Legacy Trust, dated 1998. Vista Point Legacy Trust. I asked. I have never heard of that. I have, Cassidy said. She was curled up on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket. Dad talks about it sometimes when he is drunk. He says it is his retirement ace. He bought some land or something back in the 90s, a strip of coastline near Oregon. He thinks it is worth millions. It isn't, Samuel said. He was looking at a geological survey map on his laptop. I just pulled the plat records. Vista Point is a marsh. It is unbuildable. It is worth maybe $50,000 as a conservation tax write-off. So why did Declan want it? I asked. Why go through all this, the wedding, the fake identity, the risk for a swamp worth 50 grand? Renee was typing furiously on her end. Wait, she said. I am cross-referencing the location. Vista Point, Vista Point. Her face went pale on the screen. Oh, Renee said. That is clever. That is evil, but it is clever. What? I asked. The land isn't valuable, Renee said, but the access rights are. That strip of marshland sits directly between the state highway and a proposed site for a massive new liquefied natural gas terminal. A conglomerate has been trying to buy that access route for 5 years. If they can't get it, the project dies. How much is the access worth? Samuel asked. To the right buyer, Renee said. $10 million, maybe 15. But Victor doesn't know that. He thinks it is just land. He has been sitting on a gold mine and treating it like a dirt pile. And Declan knew, I said. He found out somehow. Maybe he worked for the conglomerate. Maybe he hacked Dad's files. He knew that if he married Cassidy and got control of the trust, he could sell the access rights, pocket the $15 million, and disappear before Victor even realized the land was gone. It was the missing piece. Declan wasn't just a romance scammer. He was a corporate spy with a side hustle and broken hearts. We have him, I said. This proves intent. This proves premeditation. But before we could celebrate, my email pinged. It was a letter. The sender was a high-powered law firm in Seattle. The subject line, cease and desist / notice of intent to sue. I opened it. It wasn't from Declan. It was from Victor. Dear Ms. Diaz-Burgess, we represent Mr. Victor Diaz. You are hereby notified that your recent actions, including but not limited to the public dissemination of private family matters and the unauthorized investigation into Mr. Diaz's business associates, constitute defamation per se and tortious interference, unless you immediately cease all communication with law enforcement regarding Mr. Rowe and issue a public retraction of your statements regarding the wedding. Mr. Diaz will file suit against you for damages in the amount of $5 million. I stared at the screen. He is suing me, I said, my voice flat. My father is suing me. Cassidy sat up. What? Why? Because he is scared, Samuel said. He knows he screwed up. He knows he almost lost the $10 million he doesn't even know he has. And instead of thanking the daughter who saved him, he wants to silence her so he can pretend he was in control the whole time. He would rather destroy you than admit he was wrong, Cassidy whispered. He is protecting the image again, just like at the wedding. I looked at Cassidy. For the first time, I saw the realization hit her fully. She wasn't just a victim of Declan. She was a victim of Victor. She saw clearly that our parents would throw either of us into the fire if it meant keeping their reputation intact. What are you going to do? Cassidy asked. If you fight him, he will drag you through court for years. He will spend every penny he has to beat you. I looked at the letter. I thought about the little girl who sat at the edge of the photos. I thought about the woman who sat behind the pillar. I am not going to fight him in court, I said. I am going to end it before it gets there. I typed a reply to the lawyer. I didn't copy Renee. I didn't ask Samuel for advice. I wrote it myself. To the law offices of Smith Wesson, please find attached a timeline of events regarding the attempted theft of the Vista Point Legacy Trust by your client's associate, Mr. Declan Rowe. Also attached is the forensic analysis showing that your client, Mr. Diaz, was unaware of the asset's true value, which I have now secured and protected via a lien I placed this morning using my authority as a creditor for unpaid loans to the Diaz estate receipts attached. If Mr. Diaz wishes to proceed with a defamation suit, I will be forced to introduce these documents into the public record during discovery. I will also subpoena the financial records of his consultancy firm to prove he lacks the liquidity to sue anyone. I am ready to go to court. Is he Melody Diaz-Burgess? I hit send. You placed a lien, Samuel asked, raising an eyebrow. I paid for their roof, I said. I paid for their pool. I have receipts for $40,000 of loans over the last decade. It is enough to file a claim. It freezes the trust. Declan can't touch it. Victor can't touch it. Cassidy stared at me. You just checkmated Dad. I saved him, I said. He just doesn't know it yet, but he will. My phone buzzed again. It wasn't a threat this time. It was a location ping. Renee's face on the screen broke into a sharp, predatory smile. Melody, Renee said. The trace on the text message Declan sent you. It just cleared the proxy server. We have a GPS fix. Where is he? I asked. He didn't go far, Renee said. He is arrogant. He thinks he is smarter than the police. He is holed up in a rental cabin on the peninsula, about 20 miles from you. I looked at Samuel. He stood up and walked to the closet by the front door. He pulled out his jacket. Call the detective, Samuel said. Tell him we are serving the warrant. I looked at Cassidy. She was trembling, but there was a new look in her eyes. It wasn't fear anymore. It was anger. I want to go, Cassidy said. No, I said. You stay here. You are the witness. I am the cleaner. I stood up. I grabbed my coat. The family system was broken. My parents were suing me. My sister was a refugee in my living room. A con man was waiting in the woods with a match. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the dark. I was the one bringing the light, and it was going to be blinding. We met on a Thursday morning in a conference room in downtown Seattle. I chose the location deliberately. It was a neutral ground, rented by the hour, with glass walls, uncomfortable ergonomic chairs, and no emotional history. It was a space designed for business, not for family therapy, which was perfect because I was done with therapy. I was here for business. Victor and Teresa arrived first. My father wore his best suit, but it hung loosely on his frame. The last 2 weeks of client cancellations and internet ridicule had deflated him. Teresa wore dark glasses and a scarf wrapped tight around her neck, as if she were trying to hold herself together physically. Cassidy came in 5 minutes later, alone. She looked like a ghost of the girl who had stood on the altar. She sat at the far end of the table, as far away from our parents as possible. Then, Declan arrived. He walked in with a confidence that was almost impressive. He was not running anymore. He had received my email about the settlement meeting, and he had interpreted it as a surrender. He thought I was terrified of the lawsuit. He thought he had won. He sat down opposite me, smoothing his tie. He looked at Samuel, who was standing by the door with his arms crossed, and gave a dismissive smirk. "I am glad you finally came to your senses, Melody," Declan said. His voice was smooth, reclaiming the baritone authority he had lost in the ballroom. "This family has suffered enough because of your hysteria. I am willing to drop the defamation suit, provided you sign the retraction today, and of course, release the lien on the trust." Victor cleared his throat. "Yes, well, let us just get this signed and move on. We need to start rebuilding our image." I looked at them. I looked at the 3 people who shared my DNA, and I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, just the cool, clinical detachment of an auditor looking at a bankrupt company. "We are not here to sign a retraction. Declan," I said. I reached into my bag and pulled out a binder. It was 3 inches thick. I slid it across the polished mahogany table. It stopped directly in front of him. "We are here to review the exit strategy," I said. Declan laughed. "Exit strategy, I am not going anywhere. I am marrying your sister. We are postponing the ceremony, obviously, but the commitment stands." "Open the binder," Samuel said from the door. Declan hesitated, then flipped the cover open. The first page was not a legal threat. It was a timeline. "I know about the aliases," I said. "Daniel Rivers, David Ross, Dylan O'Connell. You have a pattern. Declan, you target families who are asset-rich but cash-poor. Families with a lot of pride and very little due diligence." Declan's smile faltered. "This is nonsense." "Page 5, I said. "That is a copy of a marriage license from Nevada. Dated 6 years ago. You married a woman named Sarah Jenkins. Her father owned a dry-cleaning empire. You divorced her 11 months later. Right after her father signed over the management rights to a holding company that you immediately liquidated." Teresa gasped. She looked at Declan, her eyes wide behind her sunglasses. "That is a lie," Declan said, his voice tightening. "That is not me." "The fingerprints are you," I said. "We pulled your prints from the wine glass you used at the rehearsal dinner. Samuel bagged it before we left. We ran it through a private database Renee has access to. It is a match. Declan, or whatever your real name is." "And the address," Samuel added, stepping forward. "The address in Oregon. You thought I was bluffing in the ballroom. But I wasn't. I went back to the files. The warehouse project, the one you used to launder the deposit money, you signed the lease using a passport under the name Declan Rowe. But the emergency contact you listed was a woman in Arizona, a woman who currently has a restraining order against you for identity theft." Declan slammed the binder shut. The noise echoed in the quiet room like a gunshot. "You have no right," he hissed. "This is illegal. You stole my fingerprints. This is inadmissible." "We are not in a court of law. Declan," I said calmly. "We are in a conference room, and I am not trying to convict you. I am just showing you why you are going to leave." I turned to Victor. My father was staring at the binder, his face a mask of gray ash. "He wasn't after Cassidy, Dad," I said. "He didn't care about the wedding. He didn't care about the Diaz legacy. He wanted the Vista Point Trust." Victor blinked. "The marshland. It is worthless." "It is worth $15 million, I said. Victor's mouth fell open. What? The access rights, I explained. The natural gas conglomerate has been trying to buy it for years. You just never answered their letters because you thought they were lowballing you. Declan knew. He was going to get you to sign the power of attorney, sell the rights to a shell company he owns for a fraction of the price, flip it to the gas company, and walk away with the profit while you were left with nothing but a tax bill. I slid a second document across the table. It was a printout of a draft contract found on Declan's cloud drive, which Renee had accessed using the password he had carelessly shared with Cassidy. He was going to sell us out, I said. He was going to bankrupt you, Dad, and he was going to use Cassidy's signature to do it. Victor looked at Declan. For the first time, I saw the veil lift, the arrogance, the desperate need to believe he had found a worthy successor. The blindness caused by his own ego, it all shattered. He looked at the man sitting across from him, and he saw the shark. You, Victor whispered. I invited you into my club. I introduced you to my friends. Because you are a fool. Victor, Declan spat, dropping the facade entirely. He leaned back, his eyes cold and dead. You are a pompous, vanity-obsessed old man who cares more about how things look than how they work. You made it so easy. You practically handed me the keys because I complimented your tie. Victor stood up, his fists clenching. I will kill you. Sit down, Dad, I said. My voice was not loud, but it was absolute. It was the voice of the person who held all the cards. Victor froze. He looked at me. He looked at the daughter he had dismissed, the daughter he had told to leave the ballroom, the daughter he had sued. You don't get to be the angry patriarch today, I said. You opened the door. You let him in. You were so busy trying to erase me from the family picture that you didn't notice you were framing yourself for a robbery. This is on you. Victor sank back into his chair. He put his head in his hands. He looked small. He looked defeated. I turned to my mother. Teresa was crying. But this time, it was not the frantic, manipulative crying of a woman trying to get her way. It was a quiet, ugly sound. We did this, she whispered. We let him treat you like that. The table, the water. We let him do it because we thought he was better. You agreed with him, I corrected. He didn't force you to ignore me. Mom, he just gave you permission to do what you already wanted to do. You wanted a perfect family photo, and I didn't fit. He just offered to crop me out. Teresa looked at me. Her makeup was ruined. Her face was old and tired. I am sorry, Melody. I am so sorry. I know, I said, but that doesn't change anything. I turned to Cassidy. My sister was staring at Declan with a look of pure revulsion. She was seeing the man who had promised her the world and realizing he was just a reflection of her own insecurities. I slid a single sheet of paper toward her. This is a cooperation agreement, I said. It states that you were a victim of fraud, not a co-conspirator. It grants full access to your digital records for the state attorney, and it annuls the marriage on the grounds of fraud. Cassidy looked at the paper. Then she looked at Declan. Don't sign that. Cass, Declan said, his voice dropping to a threatening growl. If you sign that, I release the videos. All of them. Everyone will see. Cassidy flinched. She looked at me, terrified. He doesn't have the videos, I said. Renee scrubbed his cloud drive an hour ago, and Samuel swapped his phone while he was shouting at the waiter in the coffee shop downstairs before the meeting. The device in his pocket is a dummy unit. Declan's hand flew to his jacket pocket. He pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen. It was dead. Checkmate, Samuel said. Cassidy let out a long, shuddering breath. She picked up the pen. Her hand was shaking, but she pressed the tip to the paper. I loved you, she said to Declan, without looking at him. I actually loved you, and you looked at me and saw a signature. She signed her name. Cassidy Diaz, not Cassidy Rowe. She pushed the paper to me, then she looked at me, her eyes clear. I am sorry, Mel, for the table, for everything. You were the only one who tried to save me. It is done, I said. I stacked the papers. I put them back in the binder. I stood up. The police are in the lobby. Declan, I said. They have the warrant from Oregon. And they have the new charges for the attempted fraud in Washington. You can walk out there and turn yourself in. Or you can wait for them to come up here and cuff you in front of my father. It is your choice. Declan stood up. His face was purple with rage. He looked at me, then at Samuel. He realized there was no physical way past my husband. He realized there was no legal way past me. You think you won, Declan sneered, buttoning his jacket with trembling fingers. But you are still just the bitter sister. You will always be the one they didn't want. Maybe, I said, but I am the one who is free, and you are the one going to prison. He stared at me for one last second, trying to find a weakness, trying to find a crack. He found none. He turned and walked out of the room. We heard the elevator ding. We heard the heavy doors open. And then, a moment later, we heard the distinct, sharp voice of a police officer saying, "Mr. O'Malley, place your hands behind your back." The room was silent. Victor looked at the table. Teresa wept into her scarf. Cassidy stared out the window at the rain. I looked at them one last time. They were safe. I had saved their money, their land, and their dignity, but I knew, with a clarity that hurt only for a second, that I could not save them from themselves. "The lawyer will send you the bill for the forensic accounting," I said. "Goodbye, Dad. Goodbye, Mom." I turned and walked to the door. Samuel opened it for me. "Melody," Victor called out. It was a desperate, broken sound. "Where are you going?" We should get dinner. We need to talk." I stopped. I didn't turn around. "No," I said. "I have a dinner reservation, and the table is full." I walked out. 2 hours later, Samuel and I sat in a booth at a small diner in Tacoma. It was not a Michelin-starred restaurant. The lights were fluorescent. The menu was laminated. The waitress placed a plate of meatloaf and mashed potatoes in front of me. She put down a glass of ice water. She smiled. "Can I get you anything else, hun?" she asked. "No, thank you," I said. "This is perfect." I looked at the food. It was hot. It was real. I looked at Samuel, who was cutting his burger across from me. He looked up and smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. "It is over," he said. "Yes," I said. "It is." I took a forkful of food. I ate. For years, I had thought that revenge meant making them hurt as much as I did. I thought it meant screaming, or fighting, or forcing them to admit they were wrong. But as I sat there, in the quiet warmth of the diner, I realized the truth. Revenge isn't about setting their house on fire. It is about building your own house, locking the door, and realizing that you don't care if they are standing outside in the rain. I had taken back my name. I had taken back my dignity. And most importantly, I had taken back my appetite. The table was set. The water was poured. And for the first time in my life, the seat I was sitting in belonged entirely to me. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please comment below with your city or country. Let's see how far Melody's story has traveled. Don't forget to subscribe to Juliet Revenge Stories, like this video, and smash that hype button to help us bring more satisfying justice to the world.